My son dropped his 7-year-old daughter off at my house on a Wednesday morning in March and told me he needed 2 weeks. That was 9 years ago. I am 64 years old and this is my story. My name is Bette. I spent 32 years as a pediatric occupational therapist in Raleigh, North Carolina. I know what sensory processing disorder looks like. I know what ADHD looks like. I know what a child who has been managing something alone for too long looks like. When my son Kevin pulled into my driveway that Wednesday morning, I recognized all three in the small girl sitting in his back seat before he even opened the car door. Her name was Piper. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn jaw, and she was pressing both palms flat against the window, like she was trying to measure the distance between herself and everything outside. 7 years old, a Disney princess backpack, and a paper grocery bag that held everything Kevin thought she'd need for 2 weeks. He hugged her quickly, told her to be good for Grandma, and drove away. She stood on my driveway and watched his car until it disappeared around the corner. She didn't cry. She just turned and looked at me with this expression I recognized from 30 years of work. The expression of a child who has already learned that crying doesn't change anything. "Come inside," I said. "I'll make you a grilled cheese." She looked at the front door for a long time. Then she walked past me into the house. I called Kevin that night. He didn't answer. I called his wife, Danielle, straight to voicemail. I sent a text. I sent 3 more over the following days. Kevin had always been difficult. My ex-husband used to say Kevin came out of the womb negotiating, but he'd never been unreachable. Not like this. By the end of the first week, I'd gotten one response, a text that said, "We just need more time, Mum. She's better with you." I stared at that message in my kitchen while Piper sat at the table drawing horses. She drew horses constantly, pages and pages of them from every angle, with a level of anatomical accuracy that startled me. I asked her where she learned to draw like that. She shrugged. "I just look at them until I understand them." That was the first time I really heard her. The second week came and went. I took her to her pediatrician. Dr. Abrams had been seeing Piper since birth, and she pulled out a file that was thin in all the wrong places. There were gaps, missed appointments, a referral for a developmental evaluation that had never been followed up on. "Mrs. Calloway," she said carefully, "has anyone talked to you about having Piper evaluated?" Her parents were supposed to handle that. Dr. Abrams looked at me over her glasses. "Well, you're here now. I enrolled Piper in the elementary school 3 blocks from my house. I called her old school in Greensboro to transfer her records and found out she'd had 11 absences in the last semester alone. I found out her 2nd grade teacher had flagged concerns about her reading twice, both times without response from Kevin or Danielle. It took 2 more months to get the full evaluation done. ADHD, combined type, auditory processing difficulties, significant anxiety. The psychologist who delivered the report, a kind man named Dr. Osei, told me she was also exceptionally bright. Perceptual reasoning in the 94th percentile. She's been working very hard to compensate for a long time, he said. Kids this smart often do. It's exhausting for them. I drove home thinking about all those horse drawings, all that careful observation. I just look at them until I understand them. I called Kevin. He answered this time. "We can't do it, Mum," he said. His voice had that flat tone I knew from when he was a teenager and had already decided something and didn't want to argue about it. "Danielle and I talked. We just can't. Piper needs more than we can give her right now." "Kevin," I said. "She's your daughter." "I know," he said. "She's your daughter, and you're better at this than we are." He hung up. I sat in my car in my own driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. Piper was at the kitchen table, drawing a horse. She didn't look up when I came in. She just said, "Is he coming?" I sat down across from her. "Not right now," I said. She nodded. Kept drawing. I cried in the bathroom. She never saw me. I want to tell you what the next few years looked like, but it's hard to explain something that quiet. It wasn't dramatic. It was just every day, over and over. Piper needed the same breakfast, oatmeal with honey, not sugar, and a glass of orange juice with 3 ice cubes, not 2, not 4. 3. I bought orange juice in bulk. I kept a bag of ice in the garage freezer specifically so we never ran out. I learned she couldn't do homework right after school. She needed 45 minutes of what I called decompression time, drawing horses, lying on the floor, sometimes just sitting in the backyard listening to birds. After that, homework, always in the same chair, with the same green lamp on, with a glass of water on the left side of the desk. Not the right, the left. Was I rigid about it? Yes. Did it work? More than anything else I tried. The school was harder. Her new third-grade teacher, Mrs. Munnis, Dumont, was well-meaning and completely overwhelmed. She sent notes home twice a week about Piper not focusing, Piper disrupting the class, Piper getting up from her seat. I requested an IEP meeting. Mrs. Dumont came with the school counselor and the vice principal, a man named Mr. Corbin, who kept checking his watch. I brought Piper's full psychological evaluation, Dr. Ose's report, 3 months of her schoolwork, and a 2-page typed summary of accommodations she was legally entitled to under IDA. Mrs. Calloway, Mr. Galloway, Corbin said, "We understand you want the best for Piper, but our resource room program is specifically designed for students with her profile." Her profile, I repeated. Students who learn differently, who need more support. Piper's reading comprehension is at a 5th grade level, I said. Her math reasoning is above grade level. She doesn't need the resource room. She needs extended time on tests, a preferential seat away from the window, and permission to stand at her desk when she's working. That's it. There was silence around the table. Mrs. Dumont said gently, "It's not just the academics. Then address the specific behaviors," I said, "in writing, in the IEP. Not a different classroom. We went back and forth for 2 hours. I used the word legal 4 times. By the end of the meeting, Piper had an IEP with every accommodation I'd asked for, plus 2 more I hadn't thought to request. In the car on the way home, Piper asked me what had happened. "You're going to stay in your regular class," I said. She thought about that. "With the Green Reading Group." "Yes." "Good," she said. "That's where the good books are." We found our rhythm by the time she was 9. I'd retired from clinical work, but I picked up consulting hours 2 mornings a week to cover the costs I hadn't anticipated. Therapy copays, the specialized tutor we found who understood how Piper processed language, the horseback riding lessons that turned out to be the single best thing we ever did for her anxiety. The horses were her idea. I'd expected her to suggest it eventually. She'd been drawing them for 2 years by then. But when she sat on a horse for the first time at the Sycamore Ridge Equestrian Center, something shifted in her body that I hadn't seen shift anywhere else. The instructor, a woman in her 50s named Jan, told me afterward she's not scared of them at all. Most kids are scared of them at all. Most kids are scared. "She understands them," I said. Jan looked at me. "Yeah, I can see that." Within 6 months, Piper was helping Jan with the youngest students, explaining to nervous 5-year-olds how to read a horse's ears, what it meant when a tail swished one way versus another. She'd press her hand flat against a horse's flank and say, "Feel that? That's him breathing. If you match your breathing to his, he'll trust you." She was 9 years old. Kevin called once that year. It was September, a Sunday. Piper answered the phone because she was standing next to it when it rang. I watched her face go through something complicated, surprise, then a careful flattening, like she was putting a mask on. She talked to him for 4 minutes, mostly one-word answers. Then she handed me the phone. He said he'd been thinking about things, that he and Danielle were in a better place, that maybe they could talk about a visit sometime. I told him to call when he had a specific date in mind. He didn't call again for almost a year. Piper never asked me why he didn't come. She'd ask sometimes if I'd talk to him, and I'd say yes or no depending on what was true, and she'd nod and go back to whatever she was doing. That broke my heart in a specific way that I don't have words for even now. Not that she was sad about it, but that she'd already figured out not to need the answer. She was 10 when the riding got serious. John entered her in a local show without telling her ahead of time because she'd learned that Piper performed better when she didn't have time to overthink. Piper placed second in her age group. She came out of the ring holding her ribbon and looked at it for a long moment. She said, "I want to do this for real." Jan and I looked at each other over her head. We made it work. I adjusted my consulting schedule. Jan discounted her training fees. I sold a set of my mother's china that I'd never used and put the money into entry fees and equipment. Piper had a gift that was hard to explain and impossible to fake. She could read a course in minutes, memorize the pattern, and then adjust in real time based on her horse. She didn't freeze under pressure. She focused better in competition than she did in practice, which is backwards from almost every other athlete. When I asked Jan why, she said, "Because in competition there's no room for anything except what's happening right now. That's where Piper lives. That's where Piper lives." By the time she was 13, she'd qualified for the regional junior circuit. She had a coach now, a former Olympian named Mr. Adebayo, who'd semi-retired to North Carolina and had agreed to work with her after watching her ride for 15 minutes and saying to me, quietly, "Where has this kid been?" "With me," I said. He nodded like that explained something. The regional circuit cost money I didn't entirely have. I took out a small personal loan. I picked up more consulting hours. I drove Piper 4 hours round trip to competitions in Virginia and South Carolina and Tennessee. I sat in the bleachers of a dozen different arenas, eating gas station sandwiches and watching my granddaughter do the thing she'd been born to do. Kevin came to one show. He drove up unannounced when Piper was 13, stood at the fence with his hands in his pockets while she rode. Afterward, he told her she looked great. He said he was proud of her. Piper thanked him the way you'd thank someone who held a door open for you. Polite, distant, completely closed. In the car on the way home, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Does he know how much it costs?" I glanced at her. "What do you mean? The training, the fees, the shows? Does he know you paid for all of it?" I didn't answer right away. "It doesn't matter," I said finally. She looked out the window. "It does to me. I want to talk about what happened when Piper was 15, because that's when I started to understand what she'd been building in quiet. She'd always been organized, but I'd noticed over the past 2 years that the organization had shifted from practical to something I didn't have a word for. She kept a planner that tracked not just her schedule but mine. She photographed her competition results, her training logs, her coach's written assessments, every ribbon and score sheet. She'd created a folder system on the laptop I'd bought her for school, not just for homework, but for everything. Expenses, schedules, correspondence with shows, everything organized and dated. I asked her about it once. "I like knowing what happened," she said, "so there's a record." I thought it was just part of how her brain worked, the same brain that had to have 3 ice cubes and the green lamp on. Order against chaos. I didn't think much more about it. In January of her sophomore year, she was selected for the state junior equestrian team. The letter came on a Thursday. She read it twice, set it on the counter, and went to do her homework. I picked it up, read it, put it back down. "Piper," I said, "do you understand what this is?" "It's the state team," she said from the hallway. "Honey, this is significant." She came back into the kitchen. She looked at me. "I know," she said. "I've been working toward it for 4 years. I sat down. My knees were doing that thing they'd started doing when I was proud to the point of unsteady. I called Jan that night. Jan cried. She told me she'd been coaching youth riders for 20 years, and that what Piper had wasn't just skill, it was a quality she'd only seen twice before. The local news picked it up. A teenager from Raleigh making the state team was good copy. A reporter came to the stables. Piper answered questions in exactly the way she answered every question, directly, without performance, without the warm, fuzzy quotes they were looking for. They aired the story on the Tuesday evening news. It was 3 minutes long, and they used the most boring quote she'd given them, and it still made me cry. My phone rang the following Saturday morning, a number I didn't recognize but that I knew the area code for. Greensboro. I answered. "Mum." It was Kevin. "It's been a while." "It has," I said. Silence. Then I saw Piper on the news. She's really something. She is. More silence. Kevin has always filled silence poorly. I've known this since he was 4 years old. He said, "I've been thinking. Now that things are going so well for her, maybe Danielle and I should be more involved. She's getting older and there's going to be scholarship opportunities, competitions at the national level, and she's going to need—" He paused. "She's going to need her parents." I sat down in my kitchen chair, the same one I'd sat in the night Rachel called and I'd realized she wasn't coming back. Some furniture just collects the weight of things. "Kevin," I said carefully, "what exactly are you saying?" "Piper's still a minor," he said. "Danielle and I never gave up our parental rights. We'd like to be involved in the decisions going forward, especially the financial ones. Scholarships, sponsorships, that kind of thing." There it was. I said, "I'll need to think about this." "Of course," he said. His voice had that smooth quality, the negotiating voice. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after I hung up. Piper was at the stables. She came home at 4, smelling like horses and sawdust, and found me still sitting there. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Your father called." She put her helmet bag down slowly. "What did he want?" I told her. All of it. She listened without any expression on her face. When I finished, she went to her room and closed the door quietly. I made dinner. She came out, ate, went back. At 10 o'clock she knocked on my bedroom door. "Can we talk?" We sat at the kitchen table. She brought her laptop. "I need you to know something," she said. "I've been keeping records since I was 12. "What kind of records?" "Everything." She opened the laptop. "Here are your bank statements from the last 7 years. I built a file out of everything you kept in the kitchen drawer. Every withdrawal, every entry fee, every training cost, every vet bill for the horses I rode that you covered when the stables couldn't. Here are Jan's discount invoices. Here are Mr. Adebayo's training logs with dates and fees." She turned the laptop toward me. The spreadsheet was 47 pages long. She had itemized every dollar I'd spent on her care since she was 7 years old, not just equestrian expenses. Groceries, school supplies, therapy copays, the orthodontist bill Kevin had never contributed to, medical, educational, logistical. 7 years of a life I'd been paying for alone. "And here," she said, clicking to a new tab, "contact records. Every call I ever had with my father. I logged the date, the length, what was said. Every time he called him, I logged it. Because I remembered, I stared at the screen. Every time he didn't answer. Every time the call went to voicemail. Every birthday that passed without a card. Every Christmas. She wasn't saying it with anger. She was saying it the way she said everything. Factually. Clearly. Like she was presenting the results of a study she'd been running for a long time. "Piper." I stopped. "Honey, why did you keep all this?" "Because you keep things," she said simply. "And because I wanted to know what was real. What actually happened. Not what someone could say happened later." I thought about all those horse drawings. I just look at them until I understand them. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "We need a lawyer," she said. "I found one. Helen Marsh, family law attorney, 25 years in Wake County. She was 61, compact, no nonsense, and she came highly recommended by a colleague who told me Helen had never lost a custodial grandparent case. She met with us on a Thursday afternoon, spread Piper's documentation across her desk, and went quiet for several minutes. Then she said, "How old are you?" 15, Piper said. Helen looked at me. "Did you teach her this system?" "No," I said. "She taught herself." Helen looked back at Piper. This is meticulous, Piper nodded. I know. Kevin had retained a lawyer too, a man named Greer Ashby who specialized in parental rights, reclaiming them specifically, which told me everything I needed to know about how often Kevin's situation came up. Ashby sent a letter 2 weeks after Kevin's phone call, formally requesting partial custody and specifically guardianship over any scholarship funds, sponsorship contracts or competition earnings Piper might accrue as a minor. Helen called me the evening she received the response. They're going to argue abandonment is a grey area, she said. Kevin never legally terminated his parental rights. There's no court record of a custody transfer. You raised her by informal agreement, and that puts us at a disadvantage. Can we fight it? Yes. But I want you to be prepared. Without documentary proof of abandonment, a judge may feel obligated to respect his parental standing. My stomach turned. He called her 9 times in 9 years, I said. Can you prove that? Piper can, I said. Helen was quiet for a moment. Bring everything she has. The deposition was scheduled for a Wednesday. Kevin arrived in a suit I'd never seen before. He looked well, tanned hair newly cut, the kind of polish that takes effort. He sat across the conference table from me and smiled like we were at a family dinner. Ashby walked him through it. Kevin's voice was steady, warm, full of careful regret. Can you describe your involvement in Piper's life since she went to live with your mother? I stayed in contact as consistently as I could. We went through some hard times as a couple, but I never stopped caring about Piper. I called regularly. I attended some of her early competitions when I could get away. Did you provide financial support during this time? Yes. I sent money to my mother on several occasions to help cover Piper's expenses. It was difficult financially for us, but we wanted to contribute. He gave dates, specific amounts. Christmas 2017, $400. April 2019, $700 for what he called equestrian expenses. On and on. I sat on my hands. Helen had told me, stay quiet. Let him talk. Don't react. Let him talk. Don't react. Let him talk. When it was Piper's turn, she sat across from Ashby like she was waiting for a lesson to start. Calm. Upright. Present. Do you remember your father visiting you at your grandmother's home? I remember specific instances. I don't have a memory of regular visits. Do you remember phone calls from him? Some, yes. I have a log of them. Ashby paused almost imperceptibly. A log? Yes. I kept a record of our contact. What kind of record? The date, length, and general content of each call. I started it when I was 12. She looked at him evenly. Would you like to see it? Ashby said he would review it in Discovery. He moved on. He thought he was dealing with an anxious teenager who might be rattled. He did not understand who he was dealing with. Helen asked Piper her own questions. Simple ones. Do you know your grandmother paid for your training? Yes. All of it. For 9 years. I built a full accounting. Do you want to continue living with her? Yes. Do you want your father to manage your scholarship funds or any future earnings? No. Why not? Because he wasn't there. She said it without heat, without drama, just a fact. The court date was 3 weeks later. We drove to the Wake County Courthouse on a Friday morning, Helen on my left, Piper on my right. Piper had her backpack. I noticed a tablet inside it and a portable keyboard. The courtroom was standard, wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the particular smell of recycled air and old paper. Judge Marianne Tate was in her early 60s, silver hair, reading glasses she kept taking on and off. She reviewed the documents Ashby had submitted, Kevin's carefully constructed narrative of concerned father from a distance, before she looked up. Kevin went first. Ashby walked him through his testimony, every word polished, every date memorized. December 2018, he'd attended a competition in Raleigh. February 2020, he'd sent money. He looked at Piper once while he spoke, the kind of look designed for a judge to see, full of apologetic love. Piper looked back at him with nothing on her face. Your Honor, Ashby said, presenting a folder of documents. Mr. Calloway has maintained consistent parental involvement throughout this period. He never legally relinquished his parental rights. His daughter is on the verge of a significant athletic career with attendant financial opportunities, and as her father, he is entitled to play a role in those decisions. Judge Tate reviewed the documents. They looked real. Professional formatting, notarization stamps, records of money transfers, records of visits. I'd never seen them before. Ashby submitted them in discovery. Helen had looked them over for 2 days and told me they were very good. Then it was Helen's turn. She submitted my records. 9 years of school meetings, therapy notes, medical appointments, receipts, the green lamp, the 3 ice cubes, the oatmeal with honey, the 47-page financial accounting. Judge Tate looked through it slowly. Then she looked at Piper. "Young lady, do you wish to address the court?" Piper stood. "Yes, Your Honor. I have evidence I'd like to present." Judge Tate raised an eyebrow. "What evidence?" "I've maintained a verified record of all significant contact and financial activity related to my care since I was 12 years old. I have documentation that refutes specific claims made in the submitted evidence." She paused. "I'd also like to note that I have a contact log covering the full period of my residence with my grandmother, verified against my grandmother's phone records, my father's call history as produced in discovery, and 3 years of text message records." Ashby stood. "Your Honor, this was not disclosed. It's a rebuttal to evidence submitted 4 weeks ago," Helen said calmly. Judge Tate nodded. "Proceed." Piper opened her laptop. She brought a cable and asked the bailiff politely if she could connect it to the room's display. He looked at the judge. The judge said yes. The screen at the front of the courtroom lit up. First, she pulled up Kevin's documentation, the visit records, the financial transfer records. "These documents claim my father visited me in December 2018 and February 2019, and on 7 other occasions across 9 years. She clicked through to a calendar file. "This is my grandmother's calendar for those months. She photographed every page of every planner she kept. I scanned them in 2021. Here is December 2018. She pointed to the screen. "There are entries for every day of that month. School, training, a dental appointment, Christmas at my grandmother's neighbor's house. No entry for a visit from my father." She pulled up photos. "Here are photographs from December 2018. Timestamps embedded in the file." She clicked through a dozen images. Piper at the stables, Piper in the kitchen, Christmas morning with me, Jan's holiday party. No Kevin. She pulled up the contact log, a simple spreadsheet. Dates, times, durations, notes. "My father called me 9 times in 9 years. She let that land. I have a record of each call. Here are the corresponding phone records produced in discovery, confirming the same 9 calls. None of the calls he listed in his submitted documentation appear in either record." She turned to look at Kevin. "Because they didn't happen." Kevin's face had gone very still. She pulled up the financial documentation. "These are my grandmother's complete bank records for the last 9 years. Helen obtained them through discovery." She clicked through statements. "I have flagged every deposit and transaction. There is no incoming transfer from my father. Not in December 2018. Not in February 2020. Not on any of the dates listed in his submitted evidence." She paused. "Not once in 9 years did he send money." Ashby said, "Your Honor, let her finish," Judge Tate said. Her voice had changed. Piper pulled out one more file. "In 2023, my grandmother needed to replace the roof on her house. She used the last of her retirement savings. I have the contractor invoice, the bank withdrawal, and the account statement showing the balance afterward. She'd spent her retirement on my care." She turned to face the judge directly. "My father wants to manage my scholarship funds and any future sponsorship earnings. I want the court to know who actually paid for the career those funds would represent." The courtroom was quiet. Judge Tate looked at Kevin. "Mr. Skithing, Calloway, can you explain the discrepancies between your testimony and this documentation?" Kevin looked at Ashby. Ashby was shuffling papers. Kevin said, "The dates might be slightly off. I know I was there. I know I called. Do you have any documentation of your own?" Any photos, any call records, any receipts? He didn't. Judge Tate looked at Piper's spreadsheet for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Calloway, how long have you held informal custody of your granddaughter?" 9 years, Your Honor. Since she was 7. Was that arrangement agreed upon with her father? He said he needed 2 weeks, I said. I haven't had a formal agreement in 9 years. The judge was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've seen enough." She ruled from the bench. No recess. Kevin's testimony was not credible. His submitted documentation showed inconsistencies consistent with fabrication. Full legal guardianship was awarded to me, with an order formally establishing my custodial status retroactively. She referred the submitted documentation to the Wake County DA's office for review. Kevin made a sound I didn't recognize from him, something he swallowed quickly. "This hearing is adjourned." Outside, the afternoon was warm. Early April in Raleigh, the kind of day that smells like something beginning. Piper stood on the courthouse steps beside me and tilted her face up to the sun. "You've been building that for 3 years," I said. "4," she said. "I started the contact log when I was 12. I started the financial records when I was 13. I didn't know I'd need it. I just knew I wanted it to exist." I looked at her. She was 16 years old, and she'd been quietly constructing the architecture of our truth while I drove her to competitions and made oatmeal with honey and didn't know. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged. "Because you were already doing enough. I wanted to do my part." Kevin received 2 years of formal probation. No fraud charges were ultimately filed. The DA determined the documentation had been prepared by his attorney under his direction in a legal grey area, but Ashby lost his license to practice in North Carolina 6 months later. Kevin called me once after the ruling. He asked if he could write Piper a letter. I said that was between him and her. He wrote it. Piper read it, put it in a folder, labeled the folder, and filed it. I don't know if she ever wrote back. The state junior equestrian team competed in November. I sat in the stands of the arena in Charlotte in a seat I'd had since 6 in the morning. When Piper came into the ring, I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat. She rode the course clean. Perfect. The kind of ride that makes experienced people around you go quiet because they're watching something they don't see often. She placed first. She came out of the ring with the blue ribbon held at her side, not raised up, not dramatic. She walked straight to me, and for the first time since she was 7 years old, standing in my driveway, she put her arms around me. I held on. She smelled like horses and pine shavings and the same orange juice she'd been drinking since she was 7. I thought about every early morning, every competition, every school meeting, every 3 ice cube glass of orange juice. I held on for as long as she let me. Jan was standing just behind me. She was crying in the way people cry when they're trying not to. She caught my eye and mouthed, "Worth it. She didn't need to." Things are different now. Piper is 17. She's been offered a partial scholarship from 3 universities with equestrian programs. Mr. Adebayo has been contacted by a national development program for junior riders. Jan got a full-page feature in a regional equestrian magazine and named Piper in the first paragraph. I retired my consulting work last spring. My knees are better than they were. I bought a new kettle, and I make tea now instead of coffee in the mornings, which Piper said I should try, and I kept refusing for years and finally admitted she was right. I drive to the stables on Tuesday mornings when she's training. I sit on the fence rail with my tea and watch her work. She still draws horses sometimes, though not as often. When she does, they're even better than when she was 7. She understands more now about what's underneath. The muscle, the bone, the particular intelligence in a horse's eye. She moved into the small apartment above Jan's barn last fall. She said she wanted to be closer to the horses for early morning training. That was true. But I also think she wanted to test what it felt like to leave, knowing she could come back. She comes to dinner on Sunday nights. Same chair. orange juice with 3 ice cubes. 2 months ago, she was sitting at my kitchen table after dinner looking at her phone. She put it down. Gran, she said. She'd been calling me that since she was 12 and decided grandma was too many syllables. I looked up. I want you to know something. She looked at her hands the way she does when she's choosing words carefully. When I was little and you came to every meeting and drove me everywhere and made the oatmeal the right way, I didn't know how to say thank you. My brain doesn't do that well. I know, honey. But I knew it, she said. I always knew it. I was still figuring out how to be a person. She looked up. I know now. Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside a car went by. You were worth every single day, I said. She nodded once, like we'd just confirmed something in a log. Then she picked up her phone and went back to whatever she'd been doing. I washed the dishes while she sat there. Same routine, same kitchen. When she left, she hugged me at the door. She does that now, initiates it, which still startles me sometimes in the best possible way. She went out to her truck, and I stood on the porch. Halfway down the driveway, she turned. See you Sunday, she said. Sunday, I confirmed. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner. The same corner I'd watched Kevin's taillights disappear around 9 years ago. Then I went inside and turned off the kitchen light. I love to hear from you. Have you ever raised a child who wasn't yours to raise? Have you ever had to fight for someone who didn't have anyone else to fight for them? Leave me a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe to Never Too Mature, because our best stories don't always happen when we're young. I've been thinking about what it means to reap what you sow, not in any religious sense, but in the plain, observable way that life tends to work. You put something in, you get something out. You withhold, and eventually that emptiness shows up somewhere, usually at the worst possible moment, usually in a courtroom. Kevin made a choice 9 years ago. I don't think he thought of it as a permanent choice. I think he thought of it the way people think of a lot of things they do, as temporary, as fixable later, as something he'd come back and clean up when the timing was better. The timing is never better. That's the part people who leave always seem to miss. What he didn't count on was Piper. Not the Piper he imagined, some fragile, difficult child who would always need managing. The real Piper. The one who sat on the floor of my living room at 7 years old and drew horses with anatomical precision because she'd taught herself to look at things until she understood them. The one who, at 12, started quietly building a record of her own life. Because something in her understood that truth without documentation is just a story anyone can rewrite. That's the part that gets me, even now. She didn't build that record out of anger. She wasn't plotting anything. She was just being herself, organized, observant, precise, and in being herself completely, she created something that protected both of us. You cannot fake that. You cannot manufacture that kind of integrity in a child after the fact. It comes from years of someone believing that what's real matters, that the truth is worth tracking, that accuracy is a form of respect for the world. I'd like to think I gave her some of that. 32 years as a pediatric OT, I believed down to my bones that every child is something worth finding, and that the job of the adult in the room is to find it and then get out of the way. With Piper, that meant oatmeal with honey and 3 ice cubes, and the green lamp on. It meant Jan and Mr. Adebayo and 4-hour drives to arenas in Tennessee. It meant fighting in conference rooms so she could stay in the classroom with the good books. None of it felt like sacrifice at the time. It felt like sacrifice at the time. And Kevin? I've had to sit with this. Kevin paid the price for his own absence, not because I wanted that for him, but because when you opt out of someone's life, you don't get to opt back in when the stakes get attractive. That's not cruelty. That's just how accountability works. The 9 years he didn't show up were 9 years of choices, and choices accumulate. Piper's spreadsheet was 47 pages long, because 9 years of a life is a lot of days, and every one of those days happened without him. What I want anyone watching this to take away is something simple. Presence is not a gift you give a child. It's a debt you pay forward. And when you stop paying it, somebody else picks up the tab, and that somebody builds the record. Piper didn't beat Kevin in that courtroom because she was clever, though she is. She won because she had been seen consistently for 9 years by someone who showed up. That showing up produced a child who knew her own worth, a child who could sit across from her father's lawyer and say, calmly, because he wasn't there, and mean it without bitterness, just as fact. That's what love that doesn't quit looks like from the inside. It doesn't look heroic. It looks like oatmeal and orange juice and a 47-page spreadsheet and a blue ribbon held at the side. Not raised up, because she'd never needed anyone to watch her celebrate. She'd always known